What's up, everybody? Welcome to the MSP Water Cooler. I am your host, Jonathan Schofield. My friends call me Scofie. We are joined today by our co-host, Jeffrey Newton. And today is an exceptionally special day. And before I get too far into it, if this is your first time stumbling into the MSP Water Cooler, here is what it's all about. If you are in the IT services world, if you're a managed service provider, a founder, business owner, revenue leader, you're concerned with growth, sales, business development, marketing, this is the place for you. And this is not to show you how smart Jeffrey and I are. In fact, bonus points if you can stump us. We want to hear from you. So drop in the comments any sales, marketing, business development, growth, question, concern, scenario, thing that you would like to see Jeffrey and I wrestle with. And if you're feeling brave, what we really prefer is if you would join us live on screen. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, there is a StreamYard studio link, and I'm popping it back in there again. You can copy and paste that, drop it into your browser, join us backstage in the green room, and we're going to drag your butt on screen with Jeffrey and I and give you the opportunity to ask us live. Now, if you've been paying attention to the promotional stuff preparing us for this episode today, the focus is all about objections, sales objections. Have you ever lost a deal because you were too expensive, or because you had too long a contract, or they didn't think they needed all of that, or you didn't have boots on the ground locally, et cetera, et cetera? So bonus points if your question is related to a deal you've lost, a deal you're working, or a deal that you're proud of closing. Maybe you overcame those objections. We want to hear the wins and success stories too. So we're going to get started here very, very soon. But in the meantime, while you're here, I see you online. Say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you got a question already, go ahead and just prime the pump and drop it in the comment, or use the studio link and join us backstage. Jeffrey, how are you, man?
I'm spectacular. Nothing like, the rhythm of talking about sales on the road, actually coming off of the stage yesterday at an event, talking about that exact thing to a room of about 100 MSPs. And,
right.
It always fills the soul.
It always does. It always does. And I'm sure you've never lost a deal before, Jeffrey, and you've never had a prospect say, no, we can't sign with you because of X, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Anyone who's bothered to listen to any part of my story when I made the transition, let's say, from the tech side to the sales side, I usually start off with the truth, but it is this fulcrum in my journey where I went from being the VCIO, which was really just operating as a sales engineer, for several different reps, every meeting, all that stuff, right? Until a seat on the bus opened up to jump to the other side formally as a sales executive, and did everything on my first solo opportunity the exact same way I did for 3 years before, where we were closing damn near every deal. And yeah, I got that phone call. Hey, Jeffrey, just want to let you know, we made the decision to go a different direction. And I'm like, okay, well, after my soul got scraped up off the floor, I called the individual back, not to try to change his mind, but to see if he would help me understand why, so that I could learn. And then the next hour and a half proceeded to be an MBA and everything that mattered to a buyer in sales. And that's really that was where everything changed for me. So happy to talk about objections today.
Oh, yeah, it's such a juicy one. And I know we've already got our first gentleman in the hopper. And for those of you who have never met Sam Disraeli, we are privileged to have our producer back on deck with us. He's in the background, and you can't see him on screen, though we might coax him out of his producer hole to see if we can get a question or an observation from him a little bit later. But say hi to Sam as well. RJ, I see you in the chat. Leslie, I see you in the chat. And without further ado, this is what we're gonna do. Sam is hiding. We're gonna bring our first guest on to present his question. And I see you backstage, Tyler. Looks like you're ready to go with video and mic. You'll get about 60 seconds and change to make your observation, ask your question, whatever it may be. And then we're going to kick you out of the studio. Do us a favor, re-ask your question in the comments somewhere, because that helps the algorithm. And that's very much appreciated. So Sam, I think you're able to bring Tyler on screen for us. Tyler.
Hello. How are you?
Hey, Tyler.
Do I look
Great.
dark enough? I don't think my lighting is quite great.
It's ominous
No.
enough for now. Yeah.
It looks kind of creepy.
It's mysterious and romantic. Tyler, what's your question for us?
So the question is, number one, what do you guys believe is the number one sales objection, out there? What's the most common one that potential leads / clients use?
Okay, number one. Is there a number two I'm sensing?
I think you had said, hey, what's one that you guys come across? The big one that I think we come across the most is probably the pricing one. Most people do. All the other ones, you can kind of explain. If you understand whatever you're selling, right, you should be able to explain whatever you're selling pretty well. But I think that's always kind of the big one. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, and I will pop out.
Thank you, Tyler. Very much appreciate you being here, brother.
You're welcome.
The number one objection. What is number one? I actually have an answer in my mind, but I want to hear your take on this.
Yeah, there's a handful of things. The first thing is, whenever we're talking about sales objections, anyway, like categorically, the way that I learned it and sort of figured it out, and then the way I would coach my team is that like objections are nothing more than infected questions that went unanswered during the process, right? Like that's kind of the backdrop for how I encountered and then dealt with or overcame objections. And so Tyler is right in that pricing traditionally comes up in conversation, and even though it's the thing that the prospect may point to, it's almost just as commonly never actually the point, or never actually the real objection, right? It's the smokescreen. It's the let's validate the comparison of apples to apples and apples to oranges on paper because you all look the same, sound the same, and I'm just trying to make my decision based on price because your quotes look the same too. And so there's like a whole bunch of things that go wrong in the process to get to that point where price is even coming up in a conversation. And so like I could stay there and just talk about the price piece, but why you find yourself in that situation, I think, is perhaps the more important or the more valuable piece, which is to my point about describing them like objections are nothing more than infected questions that went unanswered or unaddressed. And you'll probably hear me say this every single episode this season, but there are 3 levels to every conversation. There's the known level, the unknown level, and the hidden level. And if you do not or cannot take the conversation to the hidden level, then you will always have objections, regardless what the objection is. And like the unlock to invert that is if you're vulnerable enough, willing enough, and psychotic enough to take a conversation to the hidden level, then you've invited them in to actually tell you exactly what their objection is going to be. And then you end up in a conversation that is human to human, and you can overcome it by way of explanation, by way of communication. And to give just a tad more context and then flip it to you, those 3 levels, there's the known, right? I know something and you know something and we're willing to talk about it. Then there's the unknown, which is I know something and that you don't know, or inverse, and we're willing to talk about it. And then there's the hidden level, which is I know something that you don't know and we're unwilling to talk about it, or inverse, right? And the whole point there is like you have to pull the conversation into that level or that layer, because if you don't, you just aren't going to get to the things that truly and innately matter.
That's right. Oh man, I love it. Our answers are so close to each other, and because I think they are almost the same thing. What I was gonna say, the number one sales objection is not one that is actually often articulated by the buyer.
Mm.
It's generally a lack of trust. If you are in a sales process and it feels good, and then you get the rejection and you're like, where did that come from? I asked all the questions. They answered all the questions. I showed them the proposal. They said it looked good. I asked for the signature, and then they either ghosted you or they said no thanks with little to no explanation, right? Like, you know, Bance may have been there, budget, authority, need, time may have all been there, and yet it didn't go the way you wanted. And 9 times out of 10, it's because you said things and they didn't tell you, but the truth is, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And because they're like, and I love how you articulated that, infected questions that just never got answered. So that hidden layer you're talking about was the thing they were afraid to disclose, that you weren't brave enough or intuitive enough to ask. And because that elephant never got drug into the middle of the room, on the surface, everything looked copacetic. Like, man, I can forecast this deal, and I can go to my boss or the revenue leaders in the organization and say, we're closing this deal. And then poof. And you're like, what happened? It's because you never actually got to part of it. Great thoughts. Great questions. Okay. I don't think we have anyone else backstage yet. So just a reminder for our viewers, you can jump on screen just like Tyler did using that StreamYard link in the chat and ask your question live. I know that we've got a few questions, and we're going to touch on those here shortly. So Sam, be ready with Brian's comments soon. Not yet. I wanted to bring up a poll that I threw out this morning. It was an impulsive thing that I did. I just chucked it out there, so I didn't have a lot of time for people to respond to it. But I asked, which sales objection do you want to see Jeffrey and I triage on the MSP water cooler today? And 60% of the people who responded said, you're too expensive. Well, there were 4 options. You're too expensive. We can't sign a 12-month agreement. We need someone local to us. And the other one was other. I wrote something in the comments. So you're too expensive was the most requested one. Second by we need somebody local to us. So let's come back to that after we take Brian's question. Sam, bring it on screen for us. All right. Brian, I hope you're staying warm. If memory serves, I think you're in Maryland. I know you and I have spoken before, so I hope you got like, I'm drinking my tea myself, so good to see you in the comments there, Brian. What is the number 1 lead source you recommend? Digital marketing, et cetera, et cetera. All right, you can go ahead and take it off the screen. Number 1 lead source is a very tactical question, Jeffrey, but you take a crack at it.
You probably won't appreciate the answer because there's so much to unpack to answer it. But my immediate answer is the one that works for you. So now let's start peeling that way back. It's really not about the channel as much as it's about your messaging and your positioning. And what does that mean? Well, what you need to say and what you need to be communicating on any of the channels that you're using needs to not only resonate with the ideal audience that you're trying to get to say, raise their hand, yeah, that's me and I want that thing, I want the outcome. But it is also this evolution in the way digital specifically works, to just kind of anchor it back to the question, is the channel, the source. The reason I say messaging and positioning matters so much more than the vehicle is you have to get past the relevance and the consideration window. I've talked about this before, right? The digital world is about attention. Historically, getting the attention of someone who should be the buyer that you're trying to target. But because of the saturation of digital marketing and also how poorly it's executed in most cases, because the messaging is not dialed in, the buyers are saturated by it, right? Overstimulated by any channel. And so what I found is that we've moved past the attention economy, and you have to be able to crack the code now to the consideration window of like, you can stop the scroll maybe with a good hook, but like the person sitting there that sees it on the screen is still considering whether or not it's relevant to them. Does it meet them where they are and solve a problem that they have or promise the future they want? And so if you don't nail the messaging, it doesn't really matter where you put it in that regard. And so less about the tactics and more about the strategy.
I would echo everything Jeffrey said. I am going to also say something though, Brian. If you had to put a gun to my head and say, this is the only tactic you are allowed to use for the rest of your career to find new customers for my MSP, I would say pick up the phone, the telephone. Now, none of that will matter. Jeffrey's absolutely right. The tactic is irrelevant if you don't know who and if you don't know what the who cares about. Now, and I see RJ's comment here. The one that works for me is referrals. No complaints with this. However, this alone doesn't scale fast enough. All right, let's talk about that. Because I was going to also say, like, probably a more useful answer for you, Brian, where you're at in your business is referrals. And if I take 10 MSPs and I line them up against a wall and I ask them where their last customer came from, 8 or 9 are going to tell me from word of mouth or referrals. And there is a reason for that. There is a reason for that. And I see you there. I meant, what is your best tactic besides referrals? Yeah. Let me unpack referrals for a second though, because once we understand why this is the reality, Brian, then we can reverse engineer the tactics. Okay.
Yeah.
So the reality is a referral is easy to close because what I call the mental real estate of the prospect has already been brokered for you. That trust gap has been accelerated. You had to do nothing to earn it other than have the pre-existing relationship with whoever that referral partner was. And yeah, I mean, you had to do stuff to maintain that and make it a positive relationship. But when it came to the tactical side of it, it became an organic, natural thing. And the mental real estate was brokered for you on your behalf, which is why we love getting referrals, because the hardest part of business development is like a cheat code. We jumped ahead in the sales process to like, I think I might already trust Brian because I know this other person does. And I respect what Jeffrey thinks. And Jeffrey said I should trust Brian. So I already am halfway there. Now, that is, and to RJ's point, not particularly a scalable model to build a repeatable revenue engine around. There's could be a lot we could talk about building a referral engine, but today is not that day. But if you reverse engineer the tactic through the lens of what will earn mental real estate with my future customer, you start to understand, regardless of whether it's a phone call, regardless of whether it's an email, regardless of whether it's a digital ad or a newsletter or a postcard or a networking event I might attend, understanding the mental real estate that your prospect has and understanding how to accrue it must start with becoming obsessive over the mind of your buyer. And this is everything Jeffrey was just talking about with like, what's the hidden layer? Are you aware the persona you're engaging with? What do they actually care about? What are the outcomes they would expect? What are the sensitivities and things that mean most to them? So when you engage with them through any channel or tactic, you can come from a standpoint of authority. You said this 2 weeks ago, Jeffrey, like something about they will trust you and associate you with a solution if you can articulate their problems better than they even can. So I would venture a guess any technologist on this call right now could make a case why any business in the world needs to prioritize cybersecurity. I would venture a guess most of you on this call probably feel like, oh yeah, I can make a case for that. But can you make the case for that from the vantage point of like why your buyer specifically and uniquely should care? Like what is the outcome of it to them? And you can't just speak in generic platitudes, protecting your business and, like guarding against hackers. They've all heard that before.
Yeah.
Anyways, I
Yeah,
know I
there's
got there, but I wanted you, Brian, to have something maybe a little tactical that you could use right now. If I were you, I'd be like, who's my customer? And then is there anyone, is there a community where those prospects hang out? And then I'm going to make a physical effort to be there physically in proximity to them. And if I can't do that, I'm going to pick up the phone and be faux physically proximus to them.
Yeah, the one
Jeffrey?
thing that I will add to be more helpful on the like do the thing that works for you is 4 words that I unpacked and figured out one way to scale one channel for us, which was really take an honest look and assessment at the last 24 months in the business, right? And assess everything that you've done, which is where attribution is so important. Like, is it the golfing events that closed the last 3 deals? Or is it the chamber event? Is it the La Tip group? Is it the email campaign that you're sending out? Like, whatever it was, it doesn't matter what the answer is. It's like, look at everything you've been doing and where did the leads that you worked and or closed come from? And then that's where these 4 words mattered, which is do more and get better. And, that's not me. I just stole that from some other marketer. It was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like, let's do more of the right things that convert. And so if we did, for example, 5 golf events, right, that year, and we happened to get 3 clients from it or something, but then we did 93 other activities that took all of our time. It's like, well, why don't I just re-optimize for the thing that I knew produced some results, and I'll do more of those things. So more of the right actions will get you, more great outputs in that regard. And then specific to referrals, a lot of folks will say like, yes, that is where it's my highest lead source, but it's also the hardest to get, meaning like hardest to control or to generate. And I would agree with that and challenge it, because it's hard to get because you're asking for a referral, which is cognitively speaking and like social contract speaking, like a bunch of psychology, is an incredibly risky ask, which is why it's hard to get them. And so just reverse engineering, what is a referral anyway? One of the processes that we saw great success with was we optimized for introductions and not for referrals. So we made the ask much lower, and then we had a lot more of those asks going out. And so rather than a referral, which is like taking them to the end of the line, right? The chicken exit of the roller coaster is like, we just needed the introductions, and we time boxed it inside like a 7-minute window kind of a thing, which is a much smaller ask. And you'll get a lot more introductions that way. And then the rest is up to you, because a lot of MSPs will say the same thing. I just need you to get me in the room and then we'll take care of it. Or
that's right.
We can always close it when we're in the room. Oh, great. So like, get in the room then. Don't try to get to the contract. Just break it down to those micro steps.
That's right. And one thing that you can start doing to maybe help with referrals, like what I used to do, and I can't take all credit for this. I know Darcy Borio is probably not watching the MSP water cooler because she comes from a different industry. But if you're watching this, Darcy, shout out to you. But she and I developed a monthly or quarterly meetup with all of our referral partners. So anyone we had a positive relationship with that had ever referred business to us before, that was a strategic partner in our book, we would set up what we called a 1-hour no homework meeting. Now, not all of our referral partners would go for this, but we paid really great referral commissions. So some of them were very enthusiastic about it. And literally what we would do on this call is the person who referred business to us, they would show up. They would pull up their CRM or a spreadsheet with their Rolodex of clients, right? And one by one, they would pull up the URL, the website domain of one of their customers. And all I wanted was, hey, tell me the story of your customer. And I will tell you if I think I can help them based on what you've shared. And at the end of that, I had a pre-written email template, a referral template. It was basically just what Jeffrey said, asking for an introduction. And it wasn't a hard sell. It was like, hey, I don't think I've ever introduced you to Brian. They do amazing things for us. And if you never work together, you still should be in each other's orbit. So I encourage you to get 30 minutes together just to network and connect. And So the idea, we take an hour, we might only get through 3, right? But if I got 3 of those introduction emails from a referral partner at the end, I'd get on meetings with one or 2 of them at least. And we got some really great, interesting business from that. So that's a tactical thing that you could try doing, Brian. Go identify who else has referred business to you. See if they're open to some kind of recurring FaceTime. It's like, hey, open your book of business. Maybe you open yours. How can we help each other? Anyways, none of it happens without dedication, commitment, executing on the plan, and having the plan to begin with. This was a little bit of a tangent from the scope of our original purpose for today, but it was an incredible question, Brian. Thank you very, very much. And I appreciate it 100%. Kind of going back to our poll, before we jump into that, there is still a little bit of time. If you want to ask your question of Jeffrey and I, drop it in the comments on YouTube or LinkedIn, or use the StreamYard link, bonus points if you're brave, hop on screen and ask Jeffrey and I directly. And while we're waiting to see if anyone else pops in. So yeah, the top objection that people want you and I to talk about today, Jeffrey, is you're too expensive, or AKA I can't afford you, or AKA the other guy's cheaper. Let's talk about that. First of all, I'm sure you've never heard that objection yourself, right?
Yeah, never, not once, not like 150 different ways that all essentially say the same thing.
Right. Oh, there it is right there. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. Those were the 4 questions that the 4 options that we popped into the poll earlier today. 60% want us to talk about you're too expensive. So let's talk about that. What's going on when the buyer perceives you as expensive? In your experience as a guy who sold managed IT before, Jeffrey, that like what's going on with this objection?
Yeah.
How do we handle it?
It's the easiest, shortest, most natural thing for the buyer to point to and pull on, because it's really just communicating, I don't understand the value, or I don't understand ... like insert any other thing. Kind of back to my opening point, like objections are just those infected questions that go unanswered, right? So it's like the beginning of a conversation and not the end of one. You really need to pull that thread and understand it, and not show up to like over justify why you price the way you do, why you built your quote the way you do. Like, you don't have to go and defend it through educating or talking about all of your stack stuff or any of that crap, right? It's showing up and asking questions to actually understand why, because you got to get to the real objection, right? Like, price could be an infinite number of things too, whether that's really timing. Maybe it is budget. Maybe it's not. Maybe I don't value IT enough to care about what you're saying. So like, it could be a qualification problem, or it could be a logistics problem. It could be a budgeting problem. It could be a timing problem. It could be a lot of things, but you'll never know if you don't really truly dig in to understand that piece. And you're not going to get there unless you either attack the hidden layer conversation first, which I talked about, or be willing to ask probably 6 to 7 help me understand why questions, right? To get them to unpack that. Usually, if it's not just lack of clarity, then it's that they've anchored or associated what they think you do to something else that they can anchor it to, like something else that they can compare it to. And that's usually the other pieces of paper, because most people, when they're shopping MSP services, are looking at more than one, right? And so it's an association issue or anchoring issue, but most of the time it's just a clarity and clarifying issue of the outcome and not the what. Like, where is it again that you're trying to go? How is it that you're trying to get there? What have we done in the past? What's worked really well? What's missing in what you're experiencing right now? Have you tried to solve this problem in the past? And as you start to explore all those, right, and it's sort of a create your own, what are those books, like the create your own ending or whatever, storybook,
right?
Like, that's kind of how they go, right? Because it is unique to the other person, but very rarely is you cost too much, you're too much, I don't understand, I'll never pay that. Like, it's never really about price, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I'm going to say a thing, and you can write it down if you want. It's not hard to remember, but I firmly believe this. Zero legitimate deals are lost on price. Zero legitimate deals are lost on price. And I can hear the MSPs watching this right now saying, I know for a fact I've had people tell me that I'm too expensive and I didn't close a deal because I wasn't too expensive. One of two things is going on in that scenario. One, they are not your ideal customer. That is a high probability. Like if you work with a specific type of customer and these guys are not that, it's possible they cannot afford you, right? If you like, that is a possibility. What's more likely happening is what Jeffrey's talking about. They've not told you the true objection. Okay. So like I use the automobile analogy quite often when we're talking about pricing, because what you said, Jeffrey, about perception is so key, right? Like someone rolls into a dealership and says, I need a set of wheels. Okay. And then if that's the farthest the conversation goes, and in my lot as a dealer, I've got a pickup truck, I've got a sports car, and I've got a minivan. All of those have widely different price ranges, widely different utility. All four of them have wheels. Their perception of you as a service provider is very likely you've got wheels. You do IT. Okay. And these other guys also have wheels. They have IT. These other guys down the street, they also do IT. And so when we're comparing apples to avocados, and there's this dysfunction in their mind, they're like, I don't understand why you are 40% higher than this other guy. It's like, well, Mr. Customer, you just told me you need a towing package, right? And my truck has it. You can go the other route. You can get the minivan, but it doesn't have a towing package. That's fine if you really need to rethink. But everything I know about you and your industry and you as a persona in this buying situation, trust me, you need a truck. For everything you shared with me, you need a truck. I have the truck. And this is what the truck costs. Yeah, it's more than a minivan. It was always going to be more than a minivan, but maybe you didn't realize you needed a truck. Let me be the subject matter expert and guide you towards what you need. The worst thing you could do is buy the minivan and go to haul, a 3-ton trailer with it and then be really disappointed that it didn't work out, right? So zero legitimate deals are lost on price. There's almost always something else at play. And what do you think of that, Jeffrey?
I agree with you. It's like I said, that's where the conversation starts, and it's really more of a help me understand, right? And
right.
The other thing I think that oftentimes gets missed, just period, in MSP sales is like, we don't ask the question, who else needs to feel really good about this decision? Because very rarely is it a unilateral decision either. And we, again, are having great conversations. They're going well. We feel good about it, and then we lose it, and we don't understand why. Well, it's because the person you were selling to had to turn around and sell the decision to someone else internally. And when you have a really hard time communicating your value, how the hell is that person supposed to convey it? Especially when there's a delta or a difference in expense. There's just so much lost in that game of telephone that not talking to the right people or not taking a selling with approach instead of taking that selling to approach is often like I would call the symptom that leads you to a pricing conversation. And so if you reverse engineer it back far enough, then you can figure out, well, what are the right inputs that I need to put into this opportunity so that the output is not just a lack of clarity around price.
I like RJ's comment here. Zero budget. I ask what percentage of budget goes to IT. They say $0. They don't have a budget, which tells me they're break fix. Ugh. Yeah, I feel that in my bones. And so my question there might be, in terms of your ideal customer profile, I would imagine budget should be a consideration, right? The type of buyer who prioritizes IT and is willing to make budget. If so, either there needs to be a significant level of effort to educate this prospect, or maybe there's a good chance they're actually not a prospect
Yeah.
for you. They're wasting your time. It can be tough
Yeah.
because, man, I haven't had a lead in 3 months, and this feels like a lead because they're asking me some questions that make it feel like a lead. Could I sell something to these people? Winning
Mhm.
that deal might be the worst thing for your business, by the way.
Yeah.
I see. What's Leslie say here? Morty, I agree with you. I believe this can be a universal ideal in sales overall. 0 legitimate deals are not lost on price. Okay, yes. I want to give something really practical to you all when it comes to handling objections, okay? Especially an objection that you weren't expecting, and it just kind of smacks you across the face. And this is something I train salespeople on all the time, something I've learned in my own sales career. Whatever the root of the objection is, you need to kind of rewire your brain. That is, in fact, the reason they need you. Okay? So, whatever the root of the objection is, if they are, in fact, an ideal customer, right? The root of that objection is, in fact, the reason they need you. And I'll give you an example. Okay? So, we cannot afford to spend any more on IT than we already do. All right. That is an objection you might get from a prospect. What I would say to that, I understand that cost is a concern, and I appreciate that you're sensitive to price. A lot of my customers felt the exact same way you did. What they found after working with us is that in many cases, we were able to help streamline their IT spend, save them money, increase their profitability, et cetera, et cetera. So, in fact, because you are price sensitive and that you are nervous about spending too much on IT, that is, in fact, the reason why we should continue this conversation. Do I have your permission to share some examples? Right? You can do that with any objection, by the way. Don't lie, of course. Don't lie. But assuming that those things are true, if you really have conviction and believe that, no, actually, yeah, my contract costs more than the other guy, but from a cost savings standpoint, from like a protecting your budget and helping you be in a position to scale and grow and be profitable, I am the obvious choice because of that objection you just shared with me. That's something that well, what do you think of that, Jeffrey?
Yeah, it's true. It's a net positive approach to the same thing, which is essentially the objection is not the objection. And so you you have to break a false belief, which means you install a new one, or you're just actually qualifying what they said to get to what they meant but didn't say. So that is a neutral positive way of doing that, where you're redirecting, misdirecting, and then doubling down on the concern to either figure out, is this a false belief so that I can break it and rebuild it? Or in the course of their explanation, they'll actually tell you the true objection, but they just threw the price one out first.
That's right. That's right. Who else has got something for us? We can go back to our poll and cherry pick something else. But I want to make sure we have space for anyone else who's got a burning question for us. Bonus points if it's related to objection handling, but if it's something different and it's related to IT services, somehow related to a deal that you need help with right now, man, does anyone have an example or a story they want to share? A highlight, something that, man, they're really proud of, or, man, I wished I would have known this before and I learned it the hard way. Don't be shy. How about you, Jeffrey? You have any stories you want to share related to this?
Out of all of the deals, there's like every one of the story, right? And
That's
so
right.
there are a countless number of them to offer. The thing that I'm sitting here thinking about though is like, how can I be most useful around the topic specifically, so that like anyone that walks away could ideally use it this afternoon in their opportunity. And
That's right.
one of the things that became pretty apparent as far as the pattern goes in working deals, whether it was just me as a solo rep or when I was running a team. Breaking down the sales decision into really two buckets was one of the more helpful things, specifically around the objections too. And what I mean by that and what the two buckets were is like there is actually the decision, the choice of, yes, I want to work with you and your MSP to solve my problems, like the actual sale, the emotional decision that, yes, I have confidence and commitment towards you being the person. But then there was everything else that you had to get through in the decision-making process, which I called the logistics. So there was like the sale and then there was the logistics. Now that could have been budget, it could have been timing, it could have been onboarding, it could have been redlining, crap in an agreement, like the endless amount of things that occur on the logistics side of the decision is oftentimes where some of that smokescreen stuff comes up as objections too. And so instead, you can know that you're going to encounter that in most opportunities anyway, and not look at the objections that are coming up like, well, I'm only going to do a 93 month term instead of a 94. Like, okay, fine. That's not really an objection. It's just logistics and details.
That's
and
right.
the thing that I found is like industry best practice bullshit was so rigid on what you should do and what you need to do that like it created this like purist world of, well, my MSA never gets touched and I don't redline for anyone and I don't do any of that. It's like, well, do you want to close deals? Do you want to work relationships? Do you want to be real and like human to human? Because not every business is the same. And so all of your sales process should be optimized to winning that first part of the decision, which is like, I want to do business with you. And all the logistics is really just about putting the deal together. And
That's right.
And it doesn't mean that you make all the concessions in the world. I'm not even saying that you should have, however many clients you have should all have a different agreement. It's not that, because that can't be an excuse for not figuring out how to truly sell and lead and guide. But when it's all looked at the same way, a lot of the times I think the questions that would come up in the logistics phase are seen or perceived as objections. And then we try to overcome them or like create our own objections about their objection. And you just end up in that sort of cross-eyed way.
Yeah, that brings up a really interesting track that we could spend a little time on, because that logistics part is where a lot of deals go to die, right?
Yeah.
I had a nickel for every time a contract got lost in red line, like a sea of red lines, right?
Mhm.
Going back and forth and negotiating the minutia of the contract, et cetera, et cetera. Like, oh, we're waiting on our lawyer to get back to us, or like, man, we got to present this before the board, or et cetera, et cetera. It's just, this is why having a clearly defined process that you're going to execute from is so critical. Not because the process cannot be malleable, to your point, Jeffrey.
Mhm.
It absolutely should be. It doesn't have to be this rigid thing, but without it, what will very likely happen is on the front end of the sales process, you will fail to set meaningful expectations with the buyer, right?
Yeah.
So, hey,
Right.
Mr. Buyer, you're stepping into my sandbox. To play in my sandbox, we have some rules. If you ask me nicely, we can play outside the rules a little bit, but they're there for a reason. If you trust me to take you from here to where we're going, we can make through all of those logistical things. If you have beef with my contract, that's no problem. We can talk about that. We can work through that together. We've accounted for it in our process, in fact. We are ready for that conversation. But if we're going to step into the sandbox together, you need to understand that this is my sandbox and this is how we will play. But if you don't have a defined process, you can't have accounted for those scenarios. So what will inevitably happen is the customer, the buyer will tell you a thing and you won't be ready for it. You won't know how to respond to it or deal with it. You won't, and then you'll either go back to rigidity and be like, no, we have to do it this way, and that'll turn them off, or it'll just get bogged down in this poorly defined, ether that doesn't go anywhere. And a lot of deals die in the logistics side. All right, we are out of time. If you didn't get the opportunity to ask your question, we do review all of the comments later, but you can also join us in 2 weeks' time at episode 3 of season 2 of the MSP Water Cooler. And if you have a suggestion for a theme or a topic, or you just want to prime the pump with a question for next week, let us know. And we will see you on the next one. Any closing thoughts, Jeffrey?
Just don't get lost in the impulse of the response, right? The objection is 99% of the time, not the actual objection. Be willing to lean into the discomfort in that moment and really ask the questions to understand. And it doesn't have to be provocative. Be like, well, just help me understand. And you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to answer that particular question.
Absolutely. Thank you to our viewers who are here. Thank you to our viewers who are watching this back later. We'll catch you all on the next episode of the MSP Water Cooler, and we'll see you next time.